application if you're applying for engineering. They want to see that you've gone beyond what your teachers have told you at school, and that you're really able to demonstrate a passion and a love for this thing that you want to study at university for many years. And at Abbey College in Cambridge, we help students to demonstrate this evidence in two key ways. One being our Abbey Inspires program, which are essentially academic lectures that are super curricular, which take place usually in the evenings when schools open as normal, and they're always optional for students. So it might be an MP coming from Parliament to discuss how, let's imagine, the COVID-19 has affected the economy in the UK. So that might be something that an economics student would want to go along to. We had one a while ago on the placebo effect. And this was something that was very interesting for psychology students, but also for students who wanted to study medicine. So it's really about students being able to demonstrate that they're able to show this love and passion for quite some time before they put in their university application. The other way that we do this at Abbey College in Cambridge is through our pre-degree diploma program. And this is a program that is devised specifically for different subjects. So all the students who want to be doctors are taught in one group. All the students who want to be lawyers are taught in another group, and so on. And they all do a bespoke program once a week through the second part of their first year in the school, in the sixth form, so that they are accumulating more evidence of this super curricular activity and have very clear guidance from a subject specialist about what's going to make a top application for that particular strand of university applications. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this pre-degree diploma, and you can think about how it might apply to you and the opportunities that you have. So I think it's really important that we can change the student's view of an admissions tutor. So I've given you two pictures here. The view that I think most students have in their minds of these very scary admissions tutors, and then the reality on the other side. So the man that you can see there is David Smith, and he is one of the admissions tutors at Selwyn College in Cambridge, and he's absolutely lovely. He had a nickname when I was at university of being called the teddy bear. He's extremely approachable, and he really wants students to do their very, very best, both in the interview and throughout the application process. And that's far more reflective of really what these admissions tutors are like at the top universities. They absolutely want students to demonstrate the very best that they can do. So when we were devising this program, I went and spoke to admissions tutors that I know well. So there's Jason Pesey there from UCL, Liz Evenden, who was my supervisor at Cambridge and now works for Oxford University, and Alec Ryrie from Durham University. And I said, well, you know, what are you looking for as admissions tutors? And essentially they said these four things. They want to see evidence that students really want to do the course. I'm going back to this idea of evidencing the super curricular activity. It's absolutely crucial for a top university application. They want to see that a student's not just going to cope, but they're going to excel in their department at this top university. They really want to see evidence that students can think for themselves, not just repeat things their teachers have told them. They also want to see evidence of students who are going to add to the department and university, do more. Are they going to be involved in clubs and societies? Are they going to come to evening events that the department puts on? And the final point that they make is really ultimately lecturers enjoy teaching students. That's a huge part of the job that they do. So they're thinking, do I want to teach this student? Can I see that this student would want to learn from me? And this last bit, when I first speak to students at Abbey College Cambridge about it, I can tell that they're quite worried about this idea. But what I always remind them of is that they've already made it through an interview process. We interview every single student that we accept into the school. And part of what we're looking for when we interview for the school is this love of learning from students that are keen and ambitious and want to show themselves in the best light. So while it's not quite this, it's not the same stress level interviewing for the school as it would be for interviewing for one of these top universities, students have already had some of this experience, and it's something that we encourage and try and get them to have more of, even before they start their mock top university interviews within the school. So if you're a student listening to this, I would say see if you can get some practice of this interview. Even if you're at home with your mom and dad or brothers and sisters, see if they can just ask you 2 or 3 questions. Start off very simply. Why would you like to study this subject at university? And see if you can increase the amount of time that you can spend answering that question and the level of detail that you can give when you do so. So these are the areas that students should be thinking about, and this is what we were thinking about when we devised this program. Absolutely academic enrichment, super curricular activities, work experience. I appreciate at the moment it is very challenging to get work experience, but think back, you know, what were those times when you went and shadowed maybe a friend of mum or dad in their career? See if you can line up work experience for the future, because this is a way of demonstrating that you really understand the career path that you've chosen. Make sure you're reflecting on the views of subject specialists. Obviously at Abbey, we have a pre-degree diploma leader for each of these strands, for engineering, for medicine, for law. But reflect yourself, what do I already know? Who are the people out there in the world? If you want to study biology at university, are you listening to Alice Roberts' podcast? If you're interested in AI, are you listening to the Deep Mind podcasts that are available? The TED Talks, there is a huge amount of information out there. Be selective, think carefully about which experts you take the views of, and think critically about them. Do you always agree with everything that they're saying? You probably shouldn't. And then obviously students have to prepare for the admissions tests and the interview preparation for these top universities. And that's something we put a lot of time and effort into at Abbey. So what is the actual process, this UCAS that some of you have heard of? So in essence, it's really the process by which you apply to university in the UK for these top universities. There's quite a lengthy form. A lot of it's actually very easy to fill in. It's things like your name and where you live and your passport number and things like that. The most important parts for a student are thinking about the choices of universities in the choices section, and that means making sure that you've thought very carefully about lots of different possible outcomes from your sixth form studies. You know, what if you do have a bad day at the end? You want to make sure that you have an insurance option that means that you would still go on to a good university you are happy in. Also think about what actually if your studies are going a little bit better in a few months' time than you're seeing right now. I would recommend having a range of options available in that choices section, because students change an awful lot during year 13. In terms of the actual form itself, the other key section is the personal statement. And the personal statement must be absolutely that, personal. It's your opportunity to demonstrate all the supercurricular evidence that you've amassed, your passion for your subject, the other things that you've been doing, your extracurricular activities. Are you very good at a particular musical instrument? Have you put in a lot of time on a Duke of Edinburgh award? So it's your opportunity to showcase to the university what you're really like as a student. A really good personal statement, when I've read it, I should be able to imagine exactly what that student is like. They're the absolute best personal statements that are most likely to lead to success for a top university. You can see here in terms of the process that for many of the top universities, this application needs to go in early. If you're considering applying to Oxford or Cambridge, or if you want to apply for medicine or vet med or dentistry, you need to be submitting this application by the 15th of October. And that's the 15th of October in the year before you want to go to university. If you want to apply to other top universities like Imperial and LSE, I would recommend applying as soon as you can after the 15th of October. And the reason that I would say this is when you submit your UCAS application, the universities can't see which universities you've applied to apart from them. But if you apply to LSE or Imperial or UCL on the 16th of October or later, what you're actually saying to the university is, well, I have really good grades here. I was good enough to apply to Oxford and Cambridge, but I know Imperial is the best choice for me, or I know LSE is the place that I really want to study economics. And so by doing this, you're signaling to the university that they are even more important than some of these other very prestigious top 5 universities. So that's something I would recommend. I've put on this slide the 16th of October. It doesn't have to be the 16th, but I would say that there's an advantage to it being the 16th or some point in the rest of October compared to the beginning of October. So I would say if LSE is your first choice, even if your application is ready on the 30th of September, I would actually wait a little to send it. I've mentioned here the SAQ. This form is only relevant if you want to study at Cambridge University, and I've only put it on there to really signal that it comes very quickly after the UCAS form. I always say to students, don't be surprised at how quickly you're going to have to submit this extra form, and it includes another mini personal statement. So if you're thinking of applying to Cambridge, this is something you could start thinking about long before that form gets issued to you. It's important to make note of and think about the pre-admissions tests and interviews. A few years ago, I was able to list all the pre-admissions tests and interviews for these top 5 universities on one slide. Unfortunately, now there are so many and they have so many different nuances that I'm not able to do that. But I have gone into quite a lot of detail in the book that I've written, and I'm sure Tim would be able to get you a copy of that if that's something that you wanted to have. So after all the interview process, ultimately you would hopefully get an offer from these universities, and then all you need to do is get those absolutely outstanding A-level grades and IELTS results to secure your place. In a way, that's the easy bit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about interviews, because these are often the things that students are most worried about. So there are very strict rules in place now. If you've heard some slightly worrying stories about how interviews used to be, especially at Oxford and Cambridge, I'm not going to say that there's no truth to them. I certainly know that my own Cambridge interview experience wasn't entirely comfortable, but there are now much stricter rules in place to make sure that all interviews are fair and that they seek to get the most out of the student. The interviewer is always going to be much more interested in how a student thinks than whether they get the answer correct or not. And this is something that, again, students have to practice and get used to. There is often more than one correct answer, and the interviewer is really looking for the journey that you're making and how you react to thinking about something unknown and that you haven't come across before, than whether the answer is correct or not. If you're sitting in the interview and you're asked a question and you know that you've never thought about this topic before, please don't panic. This is actually a very, very good sign. Why is that? Well, because it means that the interviewer thinks that you're worth their time. It's worth them pushing you and seeing how you cope outside the boundaries. If they establish very quickly in the interview that they don't think that you're suitable, they're much more likely to ask you easy questions to get the interview over quicker. So when you get asked that question, take a moment, take a deep breath, and just think, actually, this is good. It's good that I'm being asked something I don't know. You equally shouldn't panic if you get it wrong. If you say something and the interviewer says, oh, that's a very interesting answer, but actually, did you know? And they give you some more information. Again, this is actually a good sign. They want to see what you're going to do with this new information and whether you're able to link it to what you already know. So I'm most confident when a student comes back from one of these top 5 university interviews, when they say, oh, It was okay, Lucy. I got these ones. I think these answers were quite good. And this one, I struggled a little bit, but I think I got there in the end. But this other question, I'm still really not sure about the answer. And I'm going to go and do some reading about it. I'm still thinking about it quite some time later. That's probably a student who's got an offer. A student who comes back and says, oh, actually, it was a lot better than I thought. I think it went really, really well. They're the ones that I'm a bit worried about, probably haven't made it. So I wanted to share with you some past interview questions that you could have a think about. So if we take the first question here, these are real questions that were used in Oxford or Cambridge interviews. Ladybirds are red, so are strawberries. Why? Now, I often ask students a question like this, and what I would like to highlight is that there's no single route forward from this point. They're very simple words here, but the ideas behind them are quite complex. And I actually can see three very easy routes forward from this particular question. And what I would suggest that a student does is play to their strengths. So you might be a student who's very strong in chemistry, in which case I would think, okay, well, we're talking about red here. We can see red both in the ladybird and in the strawberry. Well, how do we make red? What other chemicals do I know of that produce this red color? And I would perhaps start to think about pigments and dyes that have been used and what kind of chemical compounds those are made of. And I would try and lead the discussion into that area, one that I'm confident on and one where I can draw on my own knowledge to put forward a hypothesis as to why the ladybird is red and so are the strawberries from a chemical point of view. Perhaps you're thinking, well, actually, chemistry is not my strength. I'm much stronger in something like physics. Well, then maybe you think about how red light is made. Why is it that we see these things as red? And you could lead a discussion into more areas of how different colors are seen by different people, whether we think that that is the same for everybody or different, and how different parts of the light spectrum work. And that could lead you into all different kinds of areas of physics that you might feel more confident about. I think most students, when they see this question, they immediately think of biology, and that's a really strong argument as well. You might be thinking, okay, well, I can link this to ideas of evolution. I can link this to ideas about predators and prey. So you might say, well, both of these things are red, but our reaction to them as biological organisms is quite different. We look at the strawberry and the red looks attractive and enticing, and we think, well, we want to eat this strawberry. And then you might think, well, why would the strawberry want to be eaten? And you'll notice that the seeds are on the outside of the strawberry. So birds eating strawberries is good for the strawberry plant in the sense that it's going to aid its reproduction. But this idea of being eaten is possibly the opposite of what the ladybird is trying to signal by its red color. We might look at a ladybird and think, well, actually, those colors are quite similar to red things we see in nature that indicate danger. I'm thinking particularly of snakes at the moment, or large spiders. If I saw spiders with those kind of colors on, I would be quite concerned that they might be poisonous. So perhaps the ladybird is indicating to predators of ladybirds that it might be poisonous. And actually, having looked at this question quite a few times, I went and did a little bit of research, and indeed ladybirds are poisonous to certain types of birds. So it's not necessarily just a fake color that the ladybird is producing, but something realistic. So I hope that you can see that there are many different ways of approaching some of these typical interview questions. And it's about thinking calmly and carefully and trying to show yourself and your own knowledge to lead a discussion into an area that you're more comfortable with as much as you possibly can. So I thought we might do another thinking exercise. So this again is something fun I like to do with students to encourage the thinking skills. So I was going to set you a task in how many different ways can you use a spoon? And I literally mean a spoon that you would eat with. And I'm hoping that Tin is going to look at the comments that you put in the chat and shout out some of the ideas.
Yeah, so back. Make music. Any other things?
Yep.
That's a good one. That's a difficult one. I can't really translate. So like in Chinese Asian culture, if you get like he stroke, is that what you say?
Okay.
And
Yep,
then
he stroke, yeah.
you do use the spoon to sort of massage your back in a way to try to get things back, get like detoxing or something. So
I've not heard that one before. That's a good answer.
That's a cultural differences there. So someone say open a pickle jar.
Yeah, good idea.
Drug addicts.
Sorry?
The drug addicts.
Oh, yes, true. Okay.
Watch a lot of movies.
Yeah. Lockdown, nothing else to do.
Okay, cool. Anything else? Anyone? Okay, so
to dip something.
sorry?
You can you can put the cold spoon on your eyes when you need a refreshment in the morning.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, yeah. If you feel swollen, right? Like you're swollen and you put the cold spoon on your eyes. Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
I think somebody said dig a hole. That was a good answer too.
Yeah. Oh, I think I missed something. Someone say make a catapult.
Oh, I like that. That's a good answer.
Can someone say can become a jewelry?
Oh, yes. Very good.
Yeah. Good.
For book, you can use it for book, for pages.
Bookmark.
Yeah, good. That's a good one. Use a spoon to do stir fry. Yeah.
Yep.
Pretend to be narrowed in the movie Matrix and make it wiggle. Okay.
Yeah, magic trick. Yeah.
Okay. Eat ice cream.
Yes. Very important.
Yeah.
Playing a certain musical instrument.
Yeah. Make music.
Yep.
Yep.
Anything else? Any exciting thing you do with your spoon? These babies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've had about a minute on that. So we did quite well in terms of the number of different items that we came up with. So when I did this challenge myself, I gave myself 2 minutes and I came up with 25 different items.
Oh.
And I'm going to share with you some of the thinking behind the way that I went about the problem, which I think is more useful than actually knowing how many different ways you can use a spoon. So here are the ideas that I came up with. So we have something quite classic, eating, and then measuring recipes. So that was kind of quite typical in, you know, things that the spoon actually functions for. Eating, things to do with eating, cooking, that's quite a clear link. And then my link between the measuring the recipes and the musical instruments was actually thinking about my son and the amount of noise that he likes to make, banging spoons on saucepans in the kitchen. So that's how I came to musical instrument, and then drumsticks, and then things like catapult that we had, and then other things to do with making things like knitting needles, crochet hooks, the magician's prop. That's a similar idea to the Matrix that somebody said. And then linking into jewelry and bracelets, bookmarks, rulers, paintbrushes, how to make a print, thinking again, going back to this idea of my son, I was thinking, okay, well, it could be a toy, it could be an airplane, it could be a train, it could be people. There were some characters on TV when I was a child called Mr. and Mrs. Spoon, and they had spoons for arms. So that was that particular area there I was thinking of. And then I went back and thought about the catapult and thought, okay, what other physics type things can I think of? So that made me think about levers and mirrors and light shades and refractors. Again, I went back and thinking about, okay, are there more things to do with eating that I can think of? Well, yeah, you can make it into a toast rack, or if you're using it to dig, somebody said earlier, you could equally use it as a spade, You could turn it into something like a belt buckle or a hair accessory, again, developing on from this idea of accessories and jewelry and bracelets. So it was really that I was turning this, I don't have my notes to show you, I'm afraid, but I was turning it more into a mind map exercise, that I was seeing similarities and seeing if I could push my knowledge further, expand on those ideas just that little bit more. And that's really the skill that you need to develop to be able to succeed in a top 5 university application. So it doesn't really matter what very simple problem you set yourself, but give yourself a target and then come back to it and see, okay, if I give myself 30 seconds more, can I come up with a few more ideas? This creative thinking, it's a good way of getting your brain to think in a different way. So what are my top tips for international students in terms of making these top applications? Well, I've said this many times, but it's worth saying again, there's absolutely got to be evidence of your love for this subject in your personal statement, and to be able to talk about that evidence in an interview setting. It's no good saying, well, I absolutely love mathematics, if you can't prove that you've gone beyond the maths lessons that you have in the classroom. So how are you going to prove your interest? This is very individual, but it will involve things like wider reading, attending lectures. There are fantastic online courses available at the moment at different universities around the world. Have you signed up to some of those? Are you extending your knowledge beyond the curriculum? Have you got work experience set up? Do you really understand what it means to be an engineer? That it's more than just somebody who likes physics and solving problems. Fail. I often say this to students and they look quite shocked. I actually think it's really important to practice failing. It's important to learn to put your hand up and try when you're really very unsure of the answer in class. This helps you to build up resistance, to cope with receiving that knockback and come back forward again, saying that, you know, okay, I've learnt this new piece of information now. How can I extend my knowledge even further? Failing is a really important part of learning. And there's a very interesting piece of research that actually one of the best ways to succeed as a student is to take a full exam paper on a new specification before you've learned anything at all. So if you're a GCSE student now, this means doing a full set of A-level papers in one of your subjects and getting a very, very, very low score, you know, even 0%, 2%, something like that. But the very act of reading those questions, of understanding what's required, will actually make your brain better at learning that information when you do come to study it with your class. It's not something we routinely do in the school. I think it's a lot of pressure to put on a young person. But if you really think you're up for the challenge, that's an excellent way of pushing yourself and really getting your brain to accept, okay, it's all right to not know the answer. Now I'm going to go and find out. Thinking critically. So absolutely reading. Lots of people will tell you it's very important to read widely if you want to make an application to a top university, and it is, but it's much more important to think carefully about what you're reading. I'm much more impressed by a student who tells me that they've read 5 books that I've linked to their subject, and I can see they've really thought about it. They have opinions, they agree with the author in this part, and they disagree with this top scientist about their view on this particular area of the book that they're reading. That's much more impressive than a student who's read 100 books linked to their topic, but actually when you ask them, well, what was this one about? They can't really remember very much apart from the title and what was on the back cover. I think finally, asking the right questions. This was the first piece of advice I was given when I started studying at Cambridge, that actually asking the right question is the key. If you're thinking very carefully and you're being curious and you're using those critical thinking skills that I've been talking about, you're going to be asking questions. And the students who ask the most incisive questions, those are the kind of students that a top university will want to attract. So I hope that you've learned some of the key skills and areas you might want to think about if you're making or hoping to make an application to a top university in the near future. And I've shared with you some of the ways we do that at Abbey College in Cambridge. And I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, so we will have some time for the Q&A. If you prefer to talk, you can unmute yourself. If you prefer to just leave your question on the in the chat room, and I can read it out to Lucy, and Lucy can answer your questions. So yeah, please go ahead if you have any questions here.
Hi, Lucy. This is Susan Fang from Oxbridge
Hi.
Consulting. Hi. What a fantastic webinar presentation you've given. So thank you for that. It's very lively and it's very informative. Two questions. First
Sure.
of all, could you just explain a little bit more about why you think it's important for students aiming for LSE as first priority to get their application out by the 16th of October? I didn't quite get the logic behind.
Sure, no problem.
And secondly, for the Cambridge SAQ, what would you normally advise, the content to be? Because obviously students already written a 4,000 character
Sure.
personal statement.
Yeah, no problem. So my point about LSE, and to be honest, I think it's LSE more than any of the others. LSE really, really doesn't like being second choice to Cambridge or Oxford. So if a student has put down, let's say economics is the most popular course LSE offers. Let's say a student has put down economics at Cambridge and economics at LSE. Well, that student has to put that application in by the 15th of October, because otherwise they'll miss the application deadline for Cambridge. So when LSE receives that application on, say, the 15th of October, they don't know the students applied to Cambridge, but they've got a pretty good idea that they've applied to either Cambridge or Oxford. Whereas a student who submits their application to LSE on the 16th or later hasn't applied to Cambridge or Oxford, or most likely hasn't applied to Cambridge or Oxford. So it's a way of signalling to LSE that they are your first choice, your absolute top choice, and that you haven't applied to Oxbridge at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and the second part of your question about the SAQ. So the most part of the SAQ is fairly straightforward. It's more administration, and it's linked with fee status and visas and prior academic performance, and they're fairly standard questions. The bit about the personal statement, the key thing is that obviously on the UCAS form that goes to 5 different universities, and so you shouldn't be writing in your personal statement why you want to do the specialisms of one particular university, because the other 4 will know that they're not your first choice. Whereas when you submit your SAQ, this is your opportunity to explain to Cambridge why their particular Tripos course is the best one for you, why it links most closely to your interests, the areas you're most interested in exploring as part of that Tripos course. Some students also use it as an opportunity to demonstrate affiliation with a particular college, and I think that's fine, but I wouldn't make that the priority. I would certainly stick to more of an academic reasoning for that Cambridge application, and maybe a line on the college if it's particularly relevant and personal. If it isn't, I certainly don't think students are penalised for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, Lucy, I've got a couple of questions
Sure.
here. So the first one is, can you apply to Cambridge and Oxford first, and then just add other applications such as LSE after the 15th of October?
You can, but I kind of wouldn't. It is possible to add further choices later. You're still limited by the 5, but to be honest, your application has to be so strong and so coherent anyway that I think it'd be quite dangerous to submit a personal statement without really knowing what the other choices are going to be. When I'm looking at the sort of, not necessarily the last draft, but the last few drafts before we're ready to send, I'm very much thinking, well, is this application going to be well received by Cambridge, but equally, is it going to be well received by Edinburgh or UCL, the other universities that student's particularly interested in applying to? So I wouldn't do that in terms of adding later, unless there's an incredibly good reason to add, you know, one choice later. That sometimes happens. For example, medicine applicants will sometimes apply for the 4 medicine places and add in the what's usually a biomed, perhaps pharmacy choice later. But I think that's quite a particular circumstance.
Yeah, so this one's a bit similar, but it's really just asking applying both to Cambridge and LSE. Is that not recommended?
You know, I would be quite cautious about doing that. I'm not going to say that I've never had a student who's been successful in getting into both. You absolutely have, but I would say if your first choice is Cambridge, then the risk of adding LSE is much lower than if your first choice is LSE and your second choice is Cambridge.
Okay.
So that would be how I would think about it.
Okay. So there's another question from Simon. Does having a parent of G5 alumnus help in securing a spot?
No, not really. So I think it's helpful for students in the sense that they have somebody who's been through the system and who understands the demands of that system. But it isn't the case that if your parents went to Oxford or Cambridge that you have a greater chance of getting in. You'd have the same chance as any other student applying with your particular background.
Right, okay. Any other questions? I don't see anything from my chat room. So,
sorry, Tina, I just have one more question from for Lucy.
Sure.
It's Susan here again.
Sure.
I wonder whether there could be a strategy in applying to a certain college at Oxford, Cambridge. You know, it's you know, in terms of, because colleges will sometimes say how many applicants they have for certain subjects per annum.
Sure.
You know, how many places there are. I mean, is this something that Abbey Cambridge would recommend to look into strategizing behind the college application?
Yeah, so it's something that we look at quite carefully with the students. I think there's two things to think about, really. There's your general broad strategy. Certainly, you know, in the back of the book, I've produced the rankings tables, and they're available freely on the websites for both Cambridge and Oxford, so you can see you know, which college will accept so many students for particular subjects, and that's worth looking at. And I think it's worth looking at in the sense of you know, I think just being sensible, I wouldn't apply to the top. So, you know, Trinity College, Cambridge is the most famous college for mathematics. And I would equally say I have met some incredibly talented mathematicians in my career, and I've sent plenty of them off to study maths at Cambridge. I still don't think I've met one that I would advise applies to Trinity. It is incredibly competitive, and there have been many more students who apply to Trinity and then don't end up with a place at Cambridge than perhaps would have maybe got in if they'd applied a little bit further down the rankings. So I would certainly not apply to, say, the top third. Of the rest, I would then start to think a little bit more about other things that are important to students. So things like, you know, the food, especially international students, the food's really, really important. So, you know, look on the forums and get a sense of, is the food in your college something that you think that you're going to like? Do you want a college that's right in the centre? Do you want one that's a bit further out? Do you want beautiful old medieval buildings? Have you thought about the fact they're likely to be freezing cold and have intermittent hot water? You think about the practicalities of particular colleges as well, and that should help to narrow the choice down. I also advise students when they're getting a little bit sort of closer to final ideas, in terms of past experiences of how colleges treat and receive international students, particularly in the interview process. So thinking back on this year, for example, certainly the last couple of years, St Catherine's College in Cambridge, I think they're particularly good at putting international students at ease in the interview. So they're just obviously done a lot of training on it, and they make students feel relaxed very quickly. So certainly if I had a student that I thought was a little bit more likely to be nervous, I would probably be recommending a college where I thought that they were particularly strong in that area. Does that help?
Thank you.
I suppose the only thing that I haven't shared with you guys is the answer to that problem about the candles and the matches. Did anybody get there with it?
I'm going to try a stab, but I was thinking just
Yeah.
place it 1.5 meters above on the table or something. I know. Is that cheating?
Yeah, there's no table. It's an empty room.
Right. Okay.
No guesses, Tin, on the chat? I can't see the chat, I'm
No,
afraid.
nothing on the chat.
Okay, so if you think about the problem, you've got the candle, you've got matches, and you've got a box of drawing pins. So what you do is you empty the drawing pins out the box, you pin the box to the wall 1.5 meters in the air, and then you melt the candle, stick it onto the box, and light the candle.
Oh, someone just say use pins on the wall, please.
Yes.
Yeah, that was actually my idea as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
In order to leave the candle up, so I just pin them on the wall and then place the candle on top before lighting it.
Perfect. Yeah. So use the box. So I like to highlight this with students because most people don't realize they've got a box as well as drawing pins.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about attention to detail in the question. Absolutely. Okay. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, pretty good. Some other people come up ideas as well. Yeah, so any other questions for Lucy?
Lucy, can I ask? Hi, Lucy. Hi, it's Valentina.
Hi.
Can I ask you a question? I had a very hot discussion with one English man recently. He himself finished Durham University, and he said that to go to top university, you have to have a lot of like voluntary work, job. You also said that, but again, I said that academic progression and academic results is much, much more important. What do you think? What is the golden middle of this?
So what I normally say to students is you need to be able to demonstrate that you don't just live in a cupboard reading books. I think you have to demonstrate that you are more than just passionately interested in your subject. So I think it's useful to show you're going to cope with the stress of studying at a top university. So a student who does something like plays a musical instrument or swimming or badminton or anything really where you think, okay, they've demonstrated a high level of skill in another area, they've got something else they can switch off with when their studies get a bit too much. I think that's very encouraging to these universities. They don't want students who are going to burn out. But you know, if a student,
how you can put it, how, I mean, how you put it
in the personal statement, sure.
Yeah.
So I would put it in the personal statement, and depending on how the statement falls, I worry about sort of using a formula for statements because it doesn't work. But it often comes up at a good point where a student's talking about different approaches to something or teamwork, or you know, to relax, I enjoy doing this. So it often comes nearer the end of the personal statement. It depends on the subject. Something like medicine, it's easier to weave in sometimes some of these things than something like mathematics. But you can often find a link. So let's say you're applying for maths and you were quite musical. There are some very interesting studies about the links between mathematics and music. So you might use that. I'm interested in this area of maths and it has a strong link to music, and I'm also a grade 8 pianist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Lucy, I've got a couple questions here. So
sure.
I'm going to read it out because I'm not really sure the meaning. If you were to summarize everything done to a few main bullet points, how would you do it?
Demonstrate evidence of supercurricular enrichment.
Mm-hmm.
Be confident and take risks and learn to cope with the consequences.
Yep.
There we go. I think they're my bullet points.
Okay.
Think critically.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
This Steve says, could you talk a little bit more about the SAQ part?
Sure. So the SAQ only comes from Cambridge, and you receive it pretty much as soon as you submit your application, your UCAS application with Cambridge on it. And really, the university uses it to help guide part of what the interview is going to be about. So that's why it's really helpful. You would give information. So let's say you were applying for natural sciences. As part of the SAQ, you would explain which topics you've already covered in each of your subjects. So the interviewer would know, oh, they've done, let's say, the mechanics branch of mathematics. They haven't really studied statistics. So then if they want to ask you a statistics question, they're going to pitch it differently compared to a student who has been focusing on statistics. So it gives the interviewer a lot of information. It also gives them the opportunity to understand a bit more about why you've picked Cambridge and why you've picked this particular course. Because while your UCAS personal statement will demonstrate your passion for the subject more generally, it won't be linked as closely as your personal statement would on the SAQ. The limit on that personal statement is really quite short. I think it's something like, it works out about 300 words, something like that. It's not long. So you have to be even more careful with the words that you use to be able to make sure you can fit in everything that you want to say. So it's not so much that it's a difficult form. I think it's just that I've certainly worked with students before who were suddenly surprised by it. They didn't realize they had to do it. UCL certainly send out, for quite a few of their departments, they send out something similar. They suddenly ask for a piece of work and they might only give you 48 hours to turn it in. And the reason for doing that is that they don't want you to necessarily write a brand new piece of work, or perhaps they want to see if you can cope with the pressure. So there are sometimes these extra tasks that become part of the UCAS process, and they're becoming more usual than they used to be, say, 5 years ago.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Okay, so Willis says he was typing the answer for the candle, the solution for the candles.
Okay.
Then get your answer. So can
I say it again?
Yes.
Okay, so you empty the drawing pins out of the box and you pin the box on the wall 1.5 meters in the air, and then melt the bottom of the candle and stick it on the box and then light the candle.
Okay, you get that? Okay, I hope you get that. So we got a couple more questions here.
Okay.
Simon's asking, is it too young and age is an obstacle to enter G5 universities? Even all the criteria, the age,
Yeah, so it depends. That's the answer to a lot of questions, right? It depends. If you're applying for something like medicine, then yes, I wouldn't even apply. If you're under 18, you're not allowed to cut up cadavers and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that would cause you a huge problem. So I definitely wouldn't apply for something like medicine. Mm-hmm. Other universities, it depends how close to being 18 you are. If you're pretty close to being 18, so let's say, your birthday is going to be in the October, so you're going to be 17 for the first, month of being at university, a bit less, then I wouldn't worry about it so much. And certainly universities like UCL have brought in additional safeguarding measures for students who are under 18, and they've thought about that a bit more from a pastoral point of view. Mm-hmm. In terms of the top universities, certainly for Oxbridge, they're going to really be asking why. They're not especially impressed by students being young. Their view would tend to be more, well, why didn't you get a broader education when you were younger? So they would rather have a student applying who is 17 turning 18 than a student who is, say, 16 who's been rushed through school. So they would be more suspicious than impressed to start off with. Not to say that you can't then be successful. But it's not something I would strive for. It would be better to have a broader education, a wider range of subjects, and be the correct age.
Yeah, yeah, does make sense. Another question from Sean. Do you think it's a good idea to apply for several subjects at different universities instead of just one?
I think it depends what you kind of mean by that. So for example, I can think of students who apply for what would broadly be, you know, mathematical statistics / econometrics type courses. So the course names might be very different at the different universities, but actually, you know, the statistics of economics is what the student's interested in, and that is in common. That would still make a very good personal statement. But a student who wants to apply for geography at Durham and, you know, maths at York and, you know, Morse at UCL, they're going to have a personal statement that doesn't make any sense. It will either be so vague that it doesn't really have any meaning, or large chunks of it are going to put off the universities. So no, long before you're writing a personal statement, you need to be really sure about what it is that you want to study.
Yeah, because we're talking about personal statement, and then Mitz got a question about personal statements.
Sure.
So he was saying if he has an interest other than just his academic subjects, such as sports, and he wanted to include it in his personal statement, should he just focus on the academic subject, or how if he wants to include it, or should he include his interest in sports in his personal?
Yeah, so I would include it because, like I say, it shows you're a rounded person, which is fantastic. But I would try and find a link to the subject that actually wants to be studied. Does he say what the subject is he'd want to apply for?
No, he didn't specify the subject at all.
You know, it could be to do with, I mean, we were just talking about statistics. You know, if it's a maths-based course, you could talk about statistics in sport. If it was biology, there are obviously clear links with sports science and biology. So I think there are often ways.
He says chemistry and biology he wants to do.
Okay, chemistry and biology. Okay, well, I think that's quite a clear link. You can talk about, you know, the chemistry and biology of sport, that there are clear links there that you can take advantage of. So you could say, this is an area of biochemistry that I am interested in. Here's something that I've read about it. And from my own passion for sports, I agree with it in this way, and I don't agree with it in this way. My own experience is different, and expand on that.
Yep.
So I would link it to the academic if you possibly can.
Yeah, it makes sense to have everything linked together on your personal statement. Another question from Simon. Some foundation guarantee student into medicine. I think it's more for not a guarantee, but you need to pass a certain grade and interviews guarantee.
Yeah.
So what's your view as compared to taking A-level? We do have medicine foundation at Abbey Cambridge as well, to let everybody know. So yeah, I'll let you answer.
So I think it really depends on the student. So I would say if you fall into a typical medical student background, so let's say that you are 16 and you have time to do a 2-year A-level program, and that your previous academic grades, so at age 16, are very strong, that you're performing strong across all areas. If you've done GCSEs, you've done a decent number of them, and you've scored high grades, and you're able to access the work experience required, then going A-level for medicine will give you a greater number of opportunities to apply for medicine school. More medical schools will accept you than if you go a foundation route. So I think that's quite clear cut. If you're going to get, you know, 1 or 2 A stars and A in the other subject, then I would go A-level route. Where it becomes more problematic is if you don't quite fit into that profile. So if you have you know, you've only decided you want to do medicine a bit later, that you don't actually have time to do the full A-level course, or that you're concerned that even though, you know, you're doing A-level, but you're more likely to get, you know, B's or C grades than straight A stars and A's, then you're not going to be accepted by A-level into a medical school, in which case a foundation course is a better route forward. So I think it's quite difficult in the sense that you have to know yourself quite well as to which route is going to apply to you. It's certainly something that I spend a lot of time talking through with students at interview to come to Abbey College about which route is probably going to be best for them. And it's something we review very carefully during their year 12 to make sure that we've got them on the right route to give them the best chance of success for medicine. But I think, you know, the thing with foundation is once you tie yourself into a foundation route, then you have to be prepared that it is a risky route. You know, even those with guaranteed progression, as Tim said, you still have to get a certain percentage and you still have to pass the medicine interview. And even if you do, I would look very carefully at the number of students who make it through that route to the end of the medicine degree. There are a lot of programs where students don't pass the first year or they don't pass the second year. And I think that's particularly difficult for students, you know, if they've studied somewhere for 2 years to then be pushed out.
Yeah. Since we're in the topic of medicine, we will have another webinar about medicine. So our principal, Dr. Julian Davis, will do how to get into medicine school, a UK medical school, especially next week. If you are a student here, I'll suggest you to talk to your agents about this information. If you're an agent, you're supposed to get a newsletter from us already. If not, contact the regional manager to get the information. Any of my agents, I will send you the email very soon as well. So if anyone is interested about medical school in the UK, that will be a useful webinar for them to join. And one more question for Lucy. So can IGCSE English Language and Math score replace IELTS? I think they can they? I think English can replace IELTS, but I'm not so sure.
So, yeah, so some universities will only accept GCSE, not IGCSE. This is quite a complicated question, actually. So some universities will accept GCSE English instead of IELTS. Other universities will accept IGCSE first language instead of IELTS. And some universities won't accept either. It used to be the case that some would accept IGCSE second language at a very high grade, but my experience is that has stopped now. Universities won't accept that anymore. You really have to look very carefully at the particular university for the particular course that you want to do in terms of English language qualifications.
In terms of international students, we normally encourage them to do IELTS, right? So
yeah.
You've got English lessons at college,
Yeah, so we support the English very strongly in Abbey College Cambridge. A fifth of the timetable for most students is English. And they work towards the UKVI IELTS, because if you've got your 7.5 overall with 7 in everything, you can apply to any course in the UK and be accepted. So we would rather aim for the top, and then if we need to adjust later on, then we can, rather than suddenly finding out that a student needs an English qualification that they don't have and then don't have time to secure.
Okay, so Steve asked a question. Which college in Cambridge should I apply for if I am an international student? And I'm intending to apply for a math course. So
it's still too general to really answer your question. I'd probably say, having never met you, still probably not Trinity. I would have a look at the university website for the styles of colleges. Like I said, do you want a modern college? Do you want one that is very old and traditional? And I would have a think about, I would have a look at the number of international students accepted, and think about how you'd feel about that. Some students want lots of other international students, and other students would actually be happier with fewer. So I would think about that too. The size of the college. Do you want a big college or quite a small college where you might get more attention?
Yeah.
And then I think it's quite hard to say, because normally I know students quite well when I'm recommending a college. We're quite a long way through the process by that point. But you know, I certainly think you could do worse than look at places like I said, St. Catherine's. I think have really worked hard to be open to international students. So that's one I would have a look at, but that's not a firm personal recommendation, having never met you.
Right. So any other questions for others? No? No? So since there's no questions, can I just say thanks for joining today, and sorry if someone couldn't get in at the very beginning, because in my register list I don't have 100 people there, so I didn't expect more than 100. So this chat room's like limit is 100. So if you have anyone who couldn't access these chats, rest assured we probably will have another one very soon coming up. And I noticed a lot of people are asking me about Lucy's book. And if you suppose you guys all register and you're supposed to have my email address, and if you want the book, you can contact me for that. Please send me an email for the book, and so I can see, either I can send the book to your agents or to you directly, see how it goes. And the presentation, everybody's talking about presentation here, and the presentation will be sent to you as well. Please don't worry about that. And everybody say thank you to you, Lucy.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
And if you don't have any other questions, we're gonna say goodbye to everybody and thank you for joining in today. Okay, good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.